This sword is not a jian. I promise you, it's not a jian. The sword is not a jian? Hey, what's up? This is Sifu Kuttel, and actually this sword is not a jian. It is called a Tang Heng Dao, and this is made by LK Chen. It comes from the Tang Dynasty, and the name Heng Dao is in reference to when you would hang this off of your belt by the string. The suspension would keep the blade pretty much level, creating a cross shape, and that's what it's in reference to. Now, this is a really cool sword, and we're going to get to that and what you can expect if you pick one of these up for yourself from LK Chen. But first, let's talk some history. This sword is based off of the standard military issue sword that was given to all conscripts in the Tang military. Although this was given to many people, it doesn't mean that it was a cheaply made sword. In fact, it was so expensive, it would cost about 1 month's salary for a standard government employee. Now, with that said, there were also rules forbidding this sword as a funeral good, so in the long run, this made it very difficult for swords from the Tang Dynasty to make it to now. This is really important from a modern standpoint because when we want to look at historical things, tombs have been excellent ways of preserving artifacts from the past. So when they're not buried or not allowed to be buried, you don't have many specimens that survive hundreds and even thousands of years because of natural corrosion and use and other things. That doesn't mean that all blades from the Tang Dynasty have been lost to time. In fact, we have perfectly preserved blades, but in a very unexpected place, Japan. You see, the Tang Dynasty was one of the golden ages of China because it had so much trade, a lot of international interactions, and a lot was going on between China and Japan. And during that time, the craftsmanship and quality of Chinese swords caught the attention of Japanese collectors who would buy Chinese swords and then bring them back to Japan and give them as gifts or put them on display. In fact, to this day, one of the best preserved Tang Heng Dao is in Shōsō-in in Nara, Japan. So LK Chen based this blade off of that existing sword in Shōsō-in, Japan. Now, the blade fittings that are with it on display are suspected to be from a different time. So LK Chen elected to instead create the fittings of the guard, the pommel, and the scabbard itself, the scabbard fittings, off of other existing specimens from the Tang Dynasty. So although it's not a one-to-one recreation of a sword, it is a very historically accurate version of a Tang Dynasty sword. Now let's take a quick look at this sword itself. The sword itself is quite simple at first glance, with a theme of natural wenchwood and black metal fittings, with the only standout being a copper rivet in the pommel. But upon closer inspection, the black metal fittings are smooth and stylish with bevels and stylistic designs. Overall, the sword has excellent fit and finish, which keeps it secure in the scabbard. The blade has a nice bright polish and a visible distal taper that we can see along the spine of the sword. At the tip of the sword is a false edge which allows for excelled cutting and thrusting techniques. Now the shape of the handle is really interesting. Not only do we have a little bit wider here and it tapers down towards the pommel, but we have some difference in thickness tapering down towards the pommel in this direction, as well as a third direction. It's actually thicker at the back of the sword than it is at the blade edge. So no matter what, when you grab this sword, you can automatically index where the edge of the sword is. Now this same shape is on the scabbard itself, and you can kind of see this almond shape. So even when you're holding the scabbard, you can index where the blade edge is for putting the scabbard or putting the sword away in the scabbard, or unsheathing the sword, or just grabbing it if it's not hanging with the fittings upward. So how does it compare to one of these? Now typically, when it comes to comparing historical recreation of swords as compared to modern practice swords for Chinese martial arts and wushu, one of the first things that I'll say is that they're heavier swords. Now, in this case, this sword is actually lighter than some modern models. This sword is agile, it's nimble, and in cutting applications, it has a good flexible blade with a strong spine, which makes it an excellent cutting sword, especially if you're just getting into cutting. When it comes to doing traditional forms, this sword is blazingly fast and it feels very natural for the techniques that you typically would do with a modern sword. The length of the sword also makes a difference, as this sword is pretty much the same size as what you're going to get with a modern broadsword. So I do recommend this if you are just getting it for your forms practice, or if you want to get into cutting. I really think this is a great choice. And on a side note, I mean, look at this sword. It looks beautiful when it's in and outside of the scabbard. So just even if you're going to get it to put it on display, an excellent go-to sword. So in the end, this is a sword you should definitely consider picking up from LK Chen, especially if you want to get into traditional Chinese swords and ones that are historically accurate and function very well in a modern context of practicing forms or cutting applications. I will leave a link in the description down below to the LK Chen website, as well as up above, so you can check out this sword for yourself and pick one up. And as always, if you have this sword, let me know what you think. Again, like I said, a lot of people love this sword. They love cutting with it. They love practicing their forms with it. And I would love to hear your experience. So let me know what you guys think. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next.